Welcome to Whose Story Is It? Where extraordinary lessons are hidden within everyday stories. Join us today in revealing the untold stories within a business leader's success. Enjoy as we uncover the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Whose Story Is It? And today we are blessed to have someone super interesting from the East Coast, and actually East Coast of Canada, not even the U.S. So I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you know what? Thanks to the three listeners for listening. I really appreciate it. And let's get this started. Let's give us a little bit of introduction over there.
Okay, introduction, no name, and no giveaway information. This is interesting because it's funny because I've never had to think about that, an introduction without saying who I am. Well, I would go to, I'm a very curious person. I'm somebody who my whole life I've been driven by things that come up in my life, and then I decide I really want to learn more about that. I want to learn deeply about it. And so I usually go on these sort of pursuits of what can I learn about this thing? And it's always a domino that leads to the next thing.
Sure.
And so in my case, one of my earliest passions was music. And pretty early, I started playing piano at 4 and I started playing guitar at 7. And it was
Oh,
always a sort of consistent thing in my life. And over time, it became clearer and clearer to me that's what I was going to do. There was one moment of hesitation when I got into mountaineering and a lot of outdoor activity type adventure sports. Whitewater kayaking, spelunking, caving, canyoning, climbing, this kind of thing. So for a while, I'd call myself an M&M, being a musical mountaineer. And I actually went to, so I was at that time, I was in Spain, living in Spain. And so I moved to Canada to go with the idea that I was going to study outdoor recreation administration because I was going to start a
oh wow.
company
Oh, sure.
in
What year
outdoor
was that?
sports.
What year was that?
Um, man, so I am 43 years old, and that would have been when I was, I think, about 17, as
Okay.
I'd moved. So I was born in Montreal,
Oh.
and I moved to England when I was 4. Took a ship from Montreal over to England. There's a whole story in that. And then
Sure.
I moved to Spain when I was 12, and I
Where in Spain? Where in Spain were you?
where in Spain? I was I was in northern Spain. I was in um, where I was doing these sort of adventure sports was in Asturias. So if you look at the map, you've got France, then you've got the Basque Country in Spain, which crosses
Yeah.
into France and Spain. Then Cantabria, then Asturias, then Galicia, and then you get Portugal. And
Yeah.
so I was up in the north there. I was in Cantabria and in Asturias. And so I moved to Canada with the intention of getting this recreation administration degree, and I was going to start an outdoor activity
Hmm.
company. And I essentially I wasn't able to do it because my they wanted me to do another English grade 12. They weren't going to validate my Spanish stuff. And in that, I realized on campus they had a jazz degree. I did not listen to jazz. I did not play jazz, but I played a lot of other genres, with the exception of jazz, probably. And but when I was there, it came back. So I was like, you know what, I need to pursue this, and I ended up getting accepted into the jazz degree. But at that time, I didn't go into it right away. I went back to Spain, and then I ended up climbing one of the highest mountains in the world in between. So I was back to the sort of adventure side of things, but then I went back, got my degree in jazz. But as I was there, I was sort of going, well, I really don't want to end this and, from here
Sure.
go into some, I don't know, like what, bank teller or something. You know what I mean? Like, because you know how it is,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
music, either you like it or you don't. Like, no one's going to
Yeah.
like your music because you show you've
Yeah.
got a degree in something, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not
And
even,
yes.
it's rarely valuable to even be a teacher because you have to go get a teaching degree. So
Yeah.
it
It's like
really
it's
is,
very hard to make money as a musician. I mean, it's very hard to make a true living out of it.
it really is. And yet for me, I was like, okay, what do I do? Because I'm not, I didn't want to just call it a day with a degree, which, as a side note, I would say to anyone, you know, it's so important to do the things that you're passionate about. And going back to being curious, like I've loved music my whole life and everything about it, how it
Yeah.
makes people feel, to what it takes to perform, to write music. And so for me, there was no loss in doing the degree because it was something I was really interested in. But I was also equally as interested in, trying to determine how do I turn this into my life, my career. And so
Mm.
it didn't start as a degree, it started as a diploma. And then, I was getting to the end of the diploma and I was like, okay, then they actually turned it into a degree. So I was like, I'm definitely doing this. At least it buys me another 2 years type thing.
Exactly.
And then as I was getting closer to the degree being finished, I was like, okay, I have to figure out what I'm going to do because, I didn't see any example of anyone that was really turning that into,
Yeah.
a long-term career. So I was going back and forth between Spain at the time, and I was realizing there was all of these amazing musicians going throughout Europe touring, but often enough missing Spain entirely. I was like, what's going on here? Like, why is this?
Why they come Spain?
And as I spoke Spanish and English, and I had knowledge, of course, in the music um, side of things, I got really curious. Like, how did this work? Why
Yeah.
is this the case? And so, long story short, is I ended up starting my first company, which started off focusing on live touring and touring specifically international acts, mostly from North America into specifically Spain.
Huh.
And that's how I sort of got started with the music industry. And like there's always these dominoes that fall. And I think momentum's a big thing. It's like when you commit to something, call it the universe, call it whatever you want,
Yeah.
something happens that says, okay, you're taking this seriously. All right,
Yeah.
we'll let the next domino fall.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I remember I probably have been a year into running my first business. I'm in this dingy apartment, um, doing a jazz degree, and I actually ended up booking Sly and the Family Stone's first tour of Japan. And I didn't know
That's
what I was
awesome.
doing.
Sure.
No, it was like
Yeah. Yeah.
it was so funny because I made no money from that, like zero, like absolutely $0. And yet I made Sly a lot of money. And the reason I made no money was because I had no understanding of like
How it
how
worked.
to do it. Like how do
Yeah.
I make the money? And
Yeah.
he had a bad reputation from, way back
Yeah.
and, not showing up. And I'm thinking to myself, and at the time I don't have a lawyer, I have
Sure.
nothing. I have a hope and a wish and
Yeah.
whatever, lots of, motivation or whatever. And so, I saw that though as an opportunity. I was like, well, if I can do this, then what else can I do? And
Yeah.
if I don't know what they're like, if I can't figure out how to make these things make me money, then I need to figure out how these things make me money.
Hmm.
And so I just got really deep on a lot of different aspects of the music industry. So I worked with some really awesome musicians that people have heard of and others that no one's heard of. And through that, I just realized like there's so much to a career in music. And meanwhile, I'm writing my own music and
Sure.
making
You're doing your own
records and
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
doing all that kind of thing. But I found a true passion in helping other people. And so as I was working with, larger name acts, I was also getting a lot of people hitting me up, hey, can you help me? And so I got really passionate about the idea of helping other people in their careers. And so I just literally got into every aspect of the music industry, publishing, management, labels,
All of it.
distribution, touring. Uh, I was a guitar uh, tech on the road at one point. Music for TV and film, catalogs, talent
Just
development,
all of
like
it.
everything, man, like totally everything.
Yeah.
Um, I even ran some courses, and it was so interesting to me on a marketing level. It's like if you say, want to tour or have your music, oh, no, I did radio promotion,
Sure.
have your music on the radio, and people would sign up instantly. You say something like social media for musicians, no one was there. Like that, that's when it was long enough
Yeah.
ago that no
Yeah.
one gave a crap
Yeah.
about, that. And so, I did all those things and got involved with some sort of I guess the educational aspect of it. And I ended up with all this kind of content. And so I wrote my first book, which was essentially to say, I've got this information. I think it could be valuable to someone else, and more so if it's out there than if it's,
Sure.
if I'm the gatekeeper to it. So I did my first book and I decided I would practice what I preach, and I wasn't going to go beg for any kind of publishing deal. Um,
Yeah,
but
just
I'm a curious
learn how to do
guy.
it. Learn
How
how
do you
to
do
do it.
it? So
Exactly.
like, how does the industry work? How does publishing industry work? And so I used that book as a catalyst to learning about the book industry, sorry. And that got picked up as a music business textbook in a few different places, including Berkeley and
Yeah.
other places
So that leads me to a question then. How
uh,
did you earn your first dollar that wasn't paid to you by a relative?
hmm. Like you want to go way back when? Well, it's funny
Yeah,
because
like what was your first dollar? Like first time you got somebody gave you a money that wasn't a relative for a something that you did.
yeah. So it's funny because as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the time when someone was going to pay me and I didn't want to accept it. And it's something that I thought about because I realized, like I remember it was a friend of my mom and I washed her car and she went to pay me and I was just so uncomfortable, like just so uncomfortable about getting paid. And it was funny
Sure.
because I thought about that and, later in life going, wow, how,
Why? Why would you
yeah,
pay?
why? Like I did the work
Yeah.
and why am I uncomfortable with that? And then I remember, years later at high school, they had one of these things where, um, you go work for a period of time or something. I can't even remember what the
Intern,
class was.
like an intern
So,
kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, but it was in high school. It was kind of like social studies sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I went with a friend of mine because even back then when I was in high school, I had this idea for this clothing company. And a friend of mine and I had this idea, and what we were planning to do is we are going to start a clothing company that was based on the body types, endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph, and so on.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so the idea was that you'd be very quickly able to identify yourself, and essentially you'd only see clothes that would fit your
Fit.
body
Yeah.
type,
Sure.
which at the time I think was quite innovative, really, because
Yeah.
you look at the billboards and that's not going to look
Yeah.
like that on you for the
Yeah.
most part, most people.
Yep.
But I remember we went and we decided we'd go work at this mall and specifically at the Bay, which is at least in
Sure.
Canada. Yeah.
Canada. Yeah.
So I managed to sell more leather jackets than they had sold in the entire year within the week that I was there. And so they didn't pay me for that, but it was a kind of, oh, okay, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
And I would say the first sort of real dollar that I made was actually becoming an outdoor activity instructor.
Okay.
I think I'm getting that right. I did a lot of sort of volunteer
How
work.
how old were you?
Um, like that would have, I was 15.
15. Okay.
I was
Oh, you did it
15. I
right.
started I
Yeah.
started guiding people down the river
Yep.
and getting paid for it.
Sure.
And that was my first sort of real job. And I'd actually, believe it or not, I would bike I would bike 10 kilometers to the job, and then I would paddle 12 kilometers, get picked up the other end, then paddle
Exactly.
another 12
Pat.
kilometers,
Exactly.
and then bike home again.
Yeah.
And that was then. Um,
That's
yeah.
great. Yeah. And what is like how did you feel, like what was your feeling around helping the people guide the people down the river? Like what were you feeling at that point in time? Like what why were you, one, you did you do it for money? Or I'm going to guess maybe not, just by based on what I've heard, but how did you feel about that? Like what was that feeling?
Well, it's funny because I'm not saying this to sort of, ring some sort of bell or whatever the
Check a
term is.
box. Check a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people say that they perceive that I'm someone who pursues meaning and purpose, which, whatever that hierarchy of needs is sort of
Sure.
kind of the
Yeah.
top level.
Hmm.
Um, which if you look at the indigenous, it's at the bottom level. But that being said, I I have never actually had a real sense of motivation for money, and that's been to a fault at times, to a detriment, and other times it's been, I'd say overall, been really great because you end up doing what you love, and you end
Yeah.
up making an impact because you do what you love, and you do it for
Yeah. The right
reason.
reasons. Yeah.
And I used to watch my dad when I was young because I didn't live with him, and I would see him once a year, and I would come a certain point I started helping him in his line of work, and it was really fascinating because he would have this sort of, he'd tell me when I was a kid, your thoughts create your future. And I'll answer your question about the river.
Mhm.
But he had this very sort of magical way where he'd say, I have to make X amount of dollars this weekend, and this was specifically in the arts, and he would make it within, a
Yeah.
thousand dollars. And these were not small numbers either.
Yeah.
So it was kind of shocking. There was this one time where I remember he was putting on a show, and it was in Greenwich, Connecticut, and he had not made the number that he was anticipating. And I had this almost sense of me like, finally, this one time, like he's not.
Yeah.
And it was funny because at 5 o'clock at closing time on the Sunday, this couple come running in and they just go right to where he is, and they spent the exact dollar amount. I was just, what?
What?
And so, that part of my upbringing has always kind of been there in this sense of, your thoughts create your future, and,
Yeah.
intriguing ways to make, money come and be a part of the thing you love doing. So the river thing, I was it was a moment in time, and it was probably the people that I was hanging out with. And I lived in a mountainous area I mean, Spain's actually one of the most mountainous countries in Europe, which most people don't know or don't think of. And so where I was living there it was very mountainous, and so you get a very kind of certain culture with that. I knew a
Mhm.
lot of people that would work literally during the winter time and then literally go on
Yeah.
unemployment insurance to go
Mhm.
climb Everest
Exactly. Yeah.
or K2 or something like that. And so there was kind of that culture, and you're out there or you weren't, but if you were finding a way to be involved in that kind of
Yeah.
community. And so for me, it started because I spoke English. And, you
Oh,
know,
interesting.
so you've got all these tourists, like Spain's biggest
Sure.
industry is tourism. And so it was, first and foremost convenient to the people that owned the company to have a guy
Yeah.
that could speak English
Speak.
with their
Sure.
clients. So that's why it started. But it's been one of my biggest go-to metaphors in life, because what we would do is we would start the trip with instructing them on the shore to begin with how to paddle,
Oh, sure.
and
Yeah.
beyond how to paddle, what not to do. And it was very simple what you don't do. What you don't do, like if you're high in the river, generally speaking, there's not much in the way of debris that gets pushed downriver.
Uh-huh.
So if we were doing the lower part of the river, the danger was if there was trees that had fallen and we're crossing
Yeah.
specifically rapids.
Mhm.
So it was pretty straightforward. It was like, stay away from the trees. But if your kayak should hit a tree, the last thing you want to do is grab hold of a branch.
Exactly. Don't grab the
Um,
tree.
exactly. You just sort of want to let yourself go, and just I can't even think of the word in English, but it's like you go to where there's smooth still water basically,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's a metaphor in life in general, is like rapids, especially once you kind of come lower in the river. They're short. It's where it's shallowest.
Uh-huh.
It's the water's the most shallow, and they don't last long, and they always end up in an area where
There's
where it's
still.
still.
Yeah.
And so you'd have these moments where clients would be hanging on for dear life to a branch, help me, and then finally go to help them, the water would be up to your knees kind of thing.
Exactly.
But
Stand up. Just
we
stand
would,
up.
so yeah, exactly. And so we would give them this class on the river, and then I remember you would push them in, like in their vessel, and it would be remarkable because they would start to paddle, and they'd be going from one side to the other, getting stuck on the shore. They'd be going upstream, working ther asses off to and by once you knew the river, once you were, that's what you were doing all day long,
Yeah.
the amount of effort being put into going down the river, especially with newbies,
Yeah.
was minimal, because you just
Minimal.
had to find the flow
Sure.
and just basically steer. And you don't necessarily wait till the last minute to steer either. Like, like you,
You plan
you
ahead. Yeah.
prepare and you
Yeah.
plan ahead. And so that became a real metaphor for me, and just recognizing how often people make life hard for themselves. How if you can just gently steer yourself into the stream, that it's a matter of being in the stream, not fighting it. If you
Yeah.
start finding that in life you're putting more effort into what you're getting back, maybe there's a reason. It
Yeah.
shouldn't always be that difficult.
Sure.
And so, I think that answers your question.
That's good. That's totally good. What do you value in a friendship? Like what's important to you? Like
Well, I think I'm an introvert most of the time, and I'm an extrovert some of the time. I'm the kind of person that gets myself really pumped up if I'm going to go do something. I'm 100% a yes guy. Like
Yes.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
if I go to some
Sure.
place for a week to have meetings, I'm gonna say yes to every opportunity that comes up, and I'm gonna have a lot of energy to be with people. But I'm someone who knows a lot of people and at the same time has a small friend group. And I think in a friendship, it's really important to be able to be 100% yourself and to be accepted for who you are. And I've actually
Yeah.
found in the last few years how important it is to in my to spend time with men.
Oh.
And not to go
Oh.
off on a tangent with this, because
Sure.
I have friends of all shapes, sizes, sexes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you name it. Um, but it's been interesting to me that I've come to realize in the last going on 2 years specifically that there's this real value in having the ability to overlap with another human being on many levels. So in a
Mm-hmm.
friend, I like the idea that that friend can say anything, we can have a falling out, but it's not a falling out. It's never
Sure.
a falling out. It's just an ability to accept someone for who they are and to have like I love, as much as I've lived in different places, I it turns out today I live closer than I've ever lived to a friend I made at 4 years old. And
Interesting.
I love this opportunity to have a parallel narrative with another human being as a reference point to check back in on and see where we're at and know that we've known each other as long as we have. And
Yeah.
I've just felt, from a friend's standpoint, that's the difference between an acquaintance or certainly someone you don't know to someone who's a really good friend is they're going to be there, you're going to be there for them, and
Yeah.
things can go awry, but that's not going to change the friendship. And I think that's been taken to another sort of place now with spending more time with other men, in realizing that at the end of the day we all have an overlap in the human experience. And I could go on a tangent with that, especially around AI, because I find it fascinating that AI has access, like if we just speak to, let's say,
Yeah.
Chat GPT in English,
Mm-hmm.
access to the entire language.
Sure.
We have access to the entire language, but we only know so much. And of what we know, we only use so much.
Yeah.
And those are the words we have to express our experiences. Whereas, Chat GPT has all words to
All
express
words.
no experience that they've ever had.
Exactly.
And so, I think what's really interesting is finding those overlaps in being human and what the human experience is, and whether it's friends or like I'm saying now, spending more time with other guys, finding those overlaps that you can't necessarily put words to, but you can sense.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's really valuable because often enough we're in our own worlds, and if we don't have some sort of context, some sort of perspective that we can gain by externalizing our internal world, then sometimes you can start to create ideas and things that are just not necessarily good
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or justified. And so having that ability to share is really important in a friendship, I think.
Yeah. I would agree. I would agree. What give me a time. I'll take a different approach. Tell me a tell me the worst moment in your life thus far.
The worst time in my life so far. Man. Um, I think you could define that in different ways. Like I recently as in last year, I was on Cape Breton and I was,
Just
um,
funny that I know all those places, right? Because I've
yeah, it
like
is funny. Like
it's
now
it's
that I
just
know that
weird.
you,
Yeah. It's
so
fun.
I was on Cape Breton Island, and I had, uh, when I turned 40, I went and spent some time living with monks and got into meditation in a really big way. And so I frequently go back to Cape Breton and go to the same place. And I take a sort of a moment away from my normal life
Mm-hmm.
and literally
Yeah.
meditating
Sure.
and trying to sort of provide some service. And so in this particular case, my service that I was doing was I was in the forest, in the middle of nowhere, cutting cutting down trees that had fallen in the Hurricane Fiona that we had, whenever that was, that left, you know, I mean, we
Hmm.
personally had no power for 12 days, no internet for 2.5 weeks. And so I was cutting down trees that had fallen in the hurricane, and I was cutting them down with a monk, and he left, and I said I would follow behind him in about 10 minutes when I finished cutting the tree I was cutting. And I was standing on I was standing on a fallen spruce tree,
Uh-huh.
and the tree was crisscrossed, I guess, over other trees. So essentially,
Just
from
did
where
a.
I was standing to the ground was probably about waist height.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
the very long story short is I slipped, and as I slipped, my leg sort of stayed on the log, and then I started feeling a sort of burning sensation, and basically I had a spruce tree branch go through my leg,
Oh,
and
wow.
I
With
guess it
no one
must have
there. With no one there.
no one there,
Yeah.
and I think it must have snapped off as I fell.
Sure.
So as I put my hand, and it went right between, my crotch, the crease of the leg. It was like a
Uh-huh.
drumstick,
Yep.
and it went right in between my crotch and the inner thigh in that crease. Um, and I pulled it out, which is what you're not supposed to do. And the femoral arteries around there. And so I basically went into sort of survival mode, and I just sort of limped my way back up to this monastery, um, and found the monk, um, and I had this moment where I honestly thought that was it.
Yeah, yours is
And
it's over.
it was really strange, because I thought, and literally the words that went through my head was, seriously, like, this is
This
how
is
it
it.
ends.
This is how
This
it's
is
gonna
it.
end.
But it was amazing, like, because you say
Yeah.
worst experience, and well, that was an experience that was amazing, because it was like I had this blanket of reality that had felt comforting
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
life. Like you're building this patch quilt,
Yeah.
blanket of experiences, and you sort of feel a sense of security underneath. And in this case, it was like the branch had pierced my leg, gone through my leg, and now gone through this patchwork quilt of reality, telling me, yeah, Aaron, you
This
think
is
you've got some say in all this. You don't.
you don't.
And you don't know when it's going to happen. So I couldn't say that was a negative. I've had some near
Yeah.
death experiences with,
No,
adventure
that's a. I
related
mean,
things.
that's really the interesting part about that is, yeah, it was a pretty rough day. Let's just say that, right? It's a pretty rough day, but you part of your personality and just how you work is you try to look for the where do I learn things, right? Where do I learn things? You're constantly looking for that, right? So like you learned right then, like just as you said, like I learned it. Hey, you know, sometimes it's I don't have control over this stuff.
Well, you said two things that really resonate. One is, I always ask, what is this teaching me?
Yeah, yeah,
Like my biggest thing with I think, when I look at people that are successful, we all suffer from failure, but it's how quickly we get to the point of understanding what we've
mm-hmm.
learned.
Yeah, yeah,
And when you get there, then it's okay to go into the fetal position for a short period of time, but it's like,
sure,
how little time can you spend in that place,
exactly.
and how quickly can you see what you've learned to go, wow, I've it's like a client tells you no, and you're like, okay, I know where
What exactly?
where their pushback is. That's a
Yeah,
great place to be, to start going
yeah,
from there, right? But the other thing about it is you said, it wasn't a great day, and it was funny because I thought about it. I was thinking to myself, if someone had told me, some voice had said, this afternoon, Aaron, you are going to have a spruce tree branch go through your leg. It would have
yeah,
been the worst day. Like, it would have been
sure.
absolutely the worst day. You're looking around like,
Yeah,
is it this
you don't know
one?
when
When's
it's
it going
gonna
to happen?
happen. Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
And, and the reality is that that's life, like, you don't know what's going to happen. But I think what's a really important lesson too is impermanence and non-attachment, and
yeah,
the fact that we so often cling to things. And like, we all have experiences where you feel like you're getting pulled behind the pickup truck, and you're holding on to the rope, and it's like, oh, I can't take this any longer, and it's like, well, the thing is just let go, but you're
yeah,
so keen to cling onto the rope that you can't stop, and the experience continues. And I think that there's a lot of that in obviously meditation, especially becoming more aware and the observer of what's happening, and not engaging with every thought that you have, and not knee-jerk
yeah.
reacting to things. but that particular experience was very valuable in that sense. I mean, for me personally, I think one of the worst experiences actually, and again, I've been stuck in the woods at 2 in the morning with not the right clothes on, -10 with a bear surrounding me with, like sort of some semi crazy things. But I had my first panic attack when I think um, I might have been 19.
So the anxiety, you
And
mean? Like anxiety?
yeah,
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah.
And my youngest brother had epilepsy, the type that you can grow out of. But because he had epilepsy at the time, but it sort of is it that? But it couldn't be because I was
Sure.
conscious at the time. But it had a lot of the same sort of similar symptoms. And everything I looked into, and even I went to a neurologist and all this kind of stuff. Every time I looked into something that suggested panic attacks, I didn't resonate because the symptoms didn't feel like they were mine.
Oh.
So I went on for years. And as a performing musician, it was definitely a pain in the ass. Um, and the interesting thing though was is that when I came to terms with, yeah, these are panic attacks, the physical piece, which was in my case like severe shaking,
Uh-huh.
just never happened again, ever.
Just went away.
Just went away. But that negative experience, and literally went on for years. So it got to the point where I actually didn't want to go out in public because I didn't want there to be a chance of having a panic attack. And that being said, being a musician with panic attacks, I climbed one of the highest mountains in the world with asthma.
Sure.
Like, it doesn't define who you are. And in the last few months, I've actually met a guy who had panic attacks out of college and became, had got agoraphobia because of it, and decided they were going to build their business based on not having to go anywhere. And so he built these systems, and this guy is like
Yeah.
very high net worth individual. And he's built multiple companies off of a system that didn't mean
Does,
he had to be anywhere
doesn't have to be
because of
there.
these panic attacks. So that was a positive for sure for him. And so in my case, it sent me on the path of understanding the mind and really kind of, again, from a curiosity standpoint, trying to understand like, how can you have a attack on a day that you feel really good?
Yeah.
And so that sends you into the subconscious side of things. And I won't go down the rabbit hole of anxiety and whatnot, but it was interesting because I did actually look the other day. I think I Googled anxiety. It was something to do with trend, like I Googled trends, and I want to
Oh,
say that Russia was currently, most
most.
Russia had the most amount of people searching the term anxiety, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a topic I think that a lot of people suffer from because we're in a world, a modern day world in which there's no saber-toothed tigers anymore.
No,
Yet we
I know.
found new anxieties,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I would say that was a really negative experience because it felt debilitating and it sort of shaped some of my actions in my world at the time, but it turned into um, a really positive experience. And then like last year, I did as a
Here, I got another question I want to get.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, do you have? Is there a is there if I said, hey, what's a regret that you have that's occurred in the last 10 years? Would there be something pop into your mind that you regret not doing, or regret not saying, or regret not making an action? Is there something that you would?
Yeah, that's a hard one because, and that's a question I ask people. Do you believe in regret? I don't really have any regrets because regrets, I know this sounds a little bit too deep, but essentially it's meaning that you're looking into the past and wishing you could change something.
Sure.
And the past is gone.
Yeah.
The future is
Yeah.
yet to exist. So we're here now. So I'm not really a regrets kind of person, but I've been going through a divorce. So of course there's a certain amount of,
Yes.
things that can
Yes.
bring up. And I would say that, no, no, zero regrets, absolutely zero regrets. But I
Sure.
do think that there's events in life that can sharpen that sort of edge that you might play on to um, value the time you've got even more and to be more shrewd around the decisions that
Mhm.
you're making, understanding that there's always a consequence, just like those dominoes that,
Yep.
this domino does fall and it does, knock
Yeah.
over another one.
Sure.
And, is it
There's
the right
consequences to
domino?
that.
Is it the,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's, again, zero regret. We're all who we are today because of the accumulation of our experiences. And there's,
Yep. Yeah.
nothing
You can't.
wrong with that,
Yeah.
good or bad.
Yeah. Like you are who you are based on all that stuff. Well, hey, Aaron, give us the full introduction. Give us some details about who you are, what makes you tick.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Aaron Bethune. I I think my social handles, it says I'm a storyteller, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor, I'm an advisor. Um, I I started, quite a few companies over time. I'm currently involved in a few different areas, but what I try to do, even if it's not apparent to the outside world, I'm always trying to make sure the dots are connecting.
Uh-huh.
So it could sort of seem like I'm involved in things that aren't related, but to me they are, and they actually have to be to make sense for me to be involved. I let's see, in one of my
What's your
biggest
superpower?
focus.
What's your
What's
superpower?
my
Like,
superpower?
what are you really good at? Like, what's just naturally you're just you wake up, you're just good at it. What is that?
To be honest with you, I'm good at. I think I'm an empath. So I'm good at combining understanding other people's emotions, um, hearing what people are really saying, even when they're not saying it or don't know how to say it themselves. I'm really good at connecting dots. I actually had a client once who said, we can't work together anymore, Aaron. And one of the reasons they said was, you know, there's all these people have got involved, but they're people I already knew. So what did you do? And that was kind of what I did. I
Sure.
said, well, you're surrounded by all these people, and yet you couldn't see for yourself that these
Yeah.
were the dots to connect to get you to that next place.
Yeah.
Um, so I used to have a business card that would say I was a dot connector, but that was
Dot
not
connector.
very useful for most people. And so I'm consequently, I think I've been fairly good at building relationships and networks that are quite meaningful. I'm just very passionate about understanding people's stories and recognizing how each of our stories make up who we are. And so it's I think when you're invested in people and you're invested in having meaningful relationships and
Yeah.
seeing how those connections can make an impact, great things can happen. And so I would say in some levels that's been a superpower, because when you can help other people uncover who they are, then you can connect them with other people
Yeah.
that really align deeply. And
Mm.
that, might not be a short-term gain if that's why you're doing it, but it's a very fulfilling and ultimately impactful thing over time when you're getting involved with people on a deep relationship basis.
Yeah.
So the idea of let's become our best selves and make some good things happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's actually the core behind the current company that I'm very focused on, which is we write stories in which we help people write books without them putting pen to paper. But I tell people that's what makes us the same as any other company making books. What's unique is our process. And essentially, our process is to help people to pause and reflect to uncover who they are. So, we don't just do a book about marketing. We want to know how the marketer became the guru
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
experiences led to them
Like
having
it's
these
all about the
insights.
story, right? It's all about story. It's all about
It
story, right?
it is, and what's really fascinating is we rarely, I don't think most of us get a chance in life to tell our story from start to finish in context. And so what we see happen with our authors is they'll tell these stories, and pretty quickly you start to realize that you really don't have much in the way of details around experiences. But what you do have is a clear understanding of your emotions and feelings,
Yeah.
especially at that particular time. So 7 years old, something goes on, positive
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
negative, those emotions and feelings are accurate at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but you've
Yeah.
kept them internal. And so now you're an adult and you're putting all the pieces together and you're telling that story and you're kind of going, wait a second, those emotions and feelings or when I was 7. I've got so much life experience. Maybe
Yeah.
there's another way to look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you put all those pieces together, you start to realize that A, people themselves have never had that opportunity to reflect on their lives in that way. And then you start to see how these experiences have shaped your decisions and the type of insights that go into your current decision making. And I think that that in itself is quite amazing. But what's also been really interesting is seeing that when people reflect on the past, they their thinking is different than when asking them a question about today. And I say, your current advice is your best advice. And it's really interesting to see how people's current day thinking aligns with their particular story. And, you know, this is then turned into a deep interest in AI because what we're becoming very good at is understanding people. And
Mm-hmm.
so that which aligns very much with my passion. And now there's this sort of mechanism to help people through telling their
Yeah.
story. You get a book at the end of it, which is, for a lot of people, a bucket list item, but you learn a lot. And so at the end of that, it enables you to really understand how you want to move forward in life with all that you've learned about yourself. And, I think that it's also led for like, there's another organization that I'm part of, in which we're starting to build an AI tool, which is the AI is not an afterthought, but it's shining the light on the knowledge of the human being, interacting with the tool. And I think people that don't want to interact necessarily with things like ChatGPT and have negative opinions around it, or
Mm-hmm.
to get into the creative arts, is it going to destroy that side of things? This is we literally experiencing right now the last time in history that music might get created
Uh-huh.
solely by an individual,
Yeah.
and that's never again going to happen. And so we're at a pretty exciting, interesting, and unusual place in time. But at the same time, the more, you know, I interact with, different AI tools, the more I realize that it's like a, it's like a, it's a, what's the best way of putting it? It's like having a very literal assistant, that takes your word
Yeah. Yeah.
literally.
Literally,
It's like
like
if you
just.
if you took ChatGPT as an example and you went in, it's like a massive room in total darkness
Yeah.
that's got amazing information. And you go in there with a little flashlight and you sort of,
Yeah.
shine it around, and you might see some interesting stuff. But if you go in there with a flashlight that's powerful and you know where you want to shine it, you're going to get a lot of
Yes.
depth of knowledge in that topic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, all to say, that understanding of the knowledge of the human tied to AI's capabilities is really amazing. And what we've learned through our books is understanding people and what makes our experiences so important to us, and the fact that we are limited in language, whereas something like ChatGPT is not limited in its language
Yeah.
capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for us, we're very limited in the words that we have in our specific language, because of course my
Sure.
friend who's a chief in the Arctic, he tells me that in their language there's no word for hurry up. All they can say is the sun is moving. So, language in itself is, I've always been fascinated. If you speak another language, do you experience life differently because of the language you speak? But my point is that as we go through these books with authors, we've learned a lot about human experience.
Uh-huh.
So that's a big part of what I do today. I'm involved in some not-for-profits and
Yeah.
other things like that, but
That's, I
and
mean, that's,
music, still
yeah,
involved with
yeah.
music.
Well, obviously, yeah, music's always going to be part of that. So, well, hey, it's been super interesting, Aaron. I mean, just it's just the point of view, right? Everybody has a point of view. And I always think, some people's point of view is more interesting than others, just the way it is, at least for me. So I just think your point of view is that's what's interesting. Like it's just you look at it differently than many people, but definitely but different than I do, which is what I think is the interesting part of this thing is just how you view it. Like how do you get to there? Like it's just so interesting to hear like how you learned about like learning everything about the music business. Like that's just like that's like talking about rabbit hole, you went way down that rabbit hole. Like you went way deep into that rabbit hole, right? So like you're doing that, and even now with the books, helping people write books, which is like you say, it's a bucket list thing for lots of people, um, and being able to help them share their experiences, which is really the hard part, right? That's the hard part because people sometimes don't want to talk about some of those things because they have some different, some not so good memories, right? So I think that's the interesting part of that piece is like, there's a lot of value there just in general, like whether you're writing a book or not. Like I don't like who throw the book out, like just the process of going through, like asking those questions. Like there's 16 questions you go through. Like this stuff's super valuable. Like you're helping change lives, and that's to me that's a good human right there, right? It's a good
Well, I
human.
appreciate you saying that. It's interesting because, I look at it as perspectives, and I think, we all have our unique perspectives. I actually wrote a book called Reality and the Positive Power of Perspective, which I know I don't have time for that now, but big part of that was really truly, really understanding and recognizing that the only reality that we ever experience is our own personal reality. There is no other perspective to
Sure.
experience. And the friend that doesn't wave back to you on the other side of the street, and you start thinking, oh, what did I
Oh
do
my
to,
God. Well, yeah, exactly what happened. What did I do to him?
that's you projecting your own personal reality. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing to do with theirs.
Yeah.
And, so I remember, like producing, say, a band in the studio, and the feel, the groove wouldn't be quite right. Everyone's in time, but it's not quite right. And trying to understand how they were subdividing the beat in their minds.
Sure.
And so they might have been in time, but specifically, I remember that the drummer was subdividing the beat as a 16 beat, and the bass player was thinking in quarter notes. And so even though the
Sure.
time was correct, the feel was wrong. And so it was a subtle shift and go, okay, well, everyone needs to
Should
now
be. Yeah,
subdivide the
exactly.
beat by 16 beats. Um, but that to me is exactly the same in anything. Like whether you're building a business, whatever you're doing, you have to recognize everyone's got a perspective. But
Yeah.
then there's the aspect of how do we put the lens on that we can all look through. It's like, okay, we've decided you're going to drive the vehicle, but we all see where we sit in the vehicle, and then we all have to look out the front screen, front
Yeah.
window to
Yep.
to see where we're going, because that's our common view. Even though we're all unique, we still have to see something, together. And it's I don't want to sound, um, what's the right, well, let's put it this way. I find there's a certain level of humor in how serious we take things, such as the idea of a business. It's you're going to go to work and you're going to go do this thing, and it's really important, and you go there from 9 till 5, and it's a space that you go into, and it's all true.
Sure.
But it's only true because a group of people had a vision
Yeah.
and decided to try and do what it took to make other people see their vision so clearly
Yeah.
that they could turn it into something. Like, you go past the empty lot and you see barren land, but someone sees a house, someone sees a kitchen, someone sees
Yeah.
a family in it.
Yep.
And then that person has to turn around and go, okay, that would be an amazing house. They got to go find the architect. They got to go
Yeah.
find the contract. They got to find these people
Okay.
and bring them in on the same vision, and then
Yeah.
find the moving parts to make it happen. And then sure, 6 months, a year, 18 months, whatever later, you're in that house, in that kitchen, looking at that view with your family. But it didn't start with something. It started from nothing and
Sure.
a perspective. And it's the same reason that we agreed $100 bill is worth $100.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. You know what I mean?
It's
It's kind of
perceived
funny
value.
that
Perceived
it's
value, right?
perceived
It's
value.
perceived value. Yeah. 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 It's
So it's stuff that fascinates me.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna
Well,
deep dive in
well,
that now too.
well, like it's been great chatting with you today. It's like I said, I'm glad that we got connected, and I'm glad that I at least got to spend some time just listening to how you think, which is a unique piece of everyone. So thanks. What would you tell your younger self today? Like, what would you say right now? Like, just to give a little piece of advice as you kind of check out of here. Like, what piece of advice would you give Aaron at age 20?
As, as we bring it to an end, what would you?
Yes. Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
like a little big question. I think I would say to remove all uh, any hesitations and to sort of really go hard. Like, we it's okay to have calculated risks. It's okay to have trepidation in certain things, but at the same time, my 20-year-old self, I've always seen opportunities which on some level can be detrimental, because
Sure.
I can do
Yeah.
this, I can do that, but I have so little
It's
time, like I can't do everything.
shiny object syndrome. Shiny object syndrome. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that what I would tell my 20-year-old self is go deep, go hard, go all in on
Yeah.
something. Give it a year, give it, whatever amount of time and make it 110%. Don't get distracted. And you'll still have time to do all those same
Yeah,
things, but you'll
exactly.
do them much deeper.
Yeah, no, that's it. Right, you focus for a bit, but you got to give it some focus. Otherwise, you really won't ever really know. You can't fake it. I mean, you can fake it, but it doesn't make any sense to do that. Like that's actually the mistake in the matter, right? So,
Absolutely.
well, let's check this thing off.
Thank you, Mike.
Again, thanks for being here. Always great. Stay on there after I close this off. But yeah, this has been fun. Well, that's a wrap on another episode of Whose Story Is It? We grow our audience mostly through friends sharing with friends. So please share this with a friend you care about. And of course, share it on your social media. We love that. Also, if you think listening to the podcast was entertaining and valuable, then please subscribe to next week's episode. So keep moving it forward and join us next time as we continue to uncover the extraordinary in the ordinary. Have an amazing day.